I also see a lot of weather, extreme weather this year and next year. And I think that the cards based upon the god of thunder, the Ace of
Yeah,
Wands, as well as the Vishnu card, and
yeah,
then the six of swords,
right.
and then when I look at the four of pentacles, I just envision something with the coming up from the earth, so like earthquakes. I envision
Yeah,
earthquakes, lightning,
yeah,
fire and lightning,
yeah,
tornadoes and hurricanes,
yeah,
and also think about how maybe you're also pulling what has already happened, because a lot of this has already happened, and look at all the money that
yeah,
and all the people that have lost their homes and
right.
in
Yeah,
California, North Carolina, all
yeah,
around. So
yeah. And that I think is particularly summed up in that first card. The idea of the collective unconscious is a concept that I believe came out of Jung. I'm pretty sure he was the one after Freud, because those two were the origins of what we call modern psychology. But they're so
Power outages, earthquakes, global turmoil. What do the cards say? We're going to talk about it. We have expert astrologer and tarot reader Mark Lerner from GreatBearEnterprises.com. He has over 50 years experience in the field. And if you enjoy this presentation, you're going to want to watch us uncensored over on Patreon for part 2 with hundreds of hours of additional exclusive content. Enjoy the presentation, hit the bell for all notifications, leave a comment, share this video, be excellent to each other, be the change you want to see, and let's get back to the presentation right now.
Chile. Chile just lost all its power yesterday. Talk about a lot of our movies that we've been watching about losing. Oh, well, yesterday, almost all of Chile lost its everything went dark for hundreds of miles because of transformer problems. I mean, you and I just watched something, out there in the ethers about things that would just sort of like come out of nowhere, right? That are things we need. This technology. If we were living in Chile now, this wouldn't be happening yesterday. I don't know if they fixed it, but yesterday, hundreds of miles of Chile went dark. They showed pictures of people being in a mall somewhere, going on an escalator, and then that went dark. So you can, folks, look this up. This is not false news. Chile, the country of Chile in South America, lost power of an enormous stretch of the country because of it. There we go. It showed, yeah. We were trapped like sardines in the whatever it was that you just showed in the dark. Power outage in Chile leaves millions without electricity. So yeah, the thing is that I've been a news hound for 50 plus years, watching TV and so on. And now, of course, we do have issues. Is this a real story? Is it not a real story? Is it real? Is it fake? Whatever it is. So I'm just mentioning that because we were just tuned in to whether you watch things like Netflix or other kind of things that are out there.
important planetary alignments and star charts for 2025. Rex Bear Leak Project. How the heck are you, everybody? Look who it is. Mark Lerner, Great Bear Enterprises, almost 50 years experience in astrology and astronomy. His mom wanted to be a doctor. He said, okay, I'm going to be a doctor of the stars. So cool. Great to see you. How are you doing today?
Great to be with you. Hello, everybody. Plenty of astrology. Got some fantastic tarot images. And just so you know, whenever we do this, the tarot images I do right before I come on. This is not like, a week ago, these just sort of floated up. So I'm trying to do things in the moment, the now.
Mm-hmm. Great.
As much as I can with everything I'm doing. So, yeah. So
that's what I'm talking about. I'm glad to hear that. Okay. Well, let's do this, Mark. Let's start off then, since it's hot off the press. Let's start off with the tarot cards while you talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
beautiful.
Cool. All right.
Well, I'll put them up there and then we'll sort of go for it. And everybody, there's a little guidebook I was fortunate to be able to create 2 tarot decks. I started with what's called the Aquarian Tarot by David Palladini back in the 70s. And thank you. It actually, believe it or not, I've actually done tarot longer than astrology. So I got into the whole history of tarot, which is fascinating, without getting into everything. But I was fortunate to create 2 decks, the inner child cards with my ex-wife, Isha Lerner, who's done many other decks, and then baseball tarot. with a gal named Laura Phillips. I mean, you can't get any more extreme than Inner Child cards, which has been translated into many different languages, is basically all of our fairy tales that we've, when you're a child, Beauty and the Beast, Little Red Riding Hood, things like that. And the collective consciousness, so it's called inner child cards. And then I created something called Baseball Tarot with a wonderful person. All of these took immense amounts of effort, as you know, with Tarot of Ra, where you have all kinds of incredible people working with you. You have to have a great illustrator, really a great. Oh, thank you for showing that. In fact, there's a whole history of what unfortunately happened, where a lot of Baseball Tarot was in a storage facility, and the creators, Workman Publishing, wound up destroying all of these decks, like thousands of decks. So I have, like right now, 4 decks. Okay, literally 4 decks. You go on our website, I think it's $59. Somebody just ordered a tarot today, and then I get an order, and I send it out in a padded envelope. So it protects the deck and so on. So there's only 4 remaining. So if you go to greatbearenterprise.com, Baseball Tarot. Baseball season's just starting. It's still the national pastime. I know everybody loves football, basketball, soccer, ice hockey, whatever it may be. We have all these favorite sports. We love to play, we love to watch and everything. America very much, this is how I started my life, love of sports and numbers, and that's how I get into this. At any rate, when I did these cards, it was just so shocking to me. Probably because I am doing these things in the moment. You and I had arranged to have this show happening at this point. I'm very, very grateful for that. So on the left, let's just start with the 4 of Pentacles, if I can find it here. Okay, so I dog-eared this. That's actually, you'll see, if you can see it, you'll see P, L, so on. There's these letters. So it sort of connects up to Pluto. Okay, I'm just going to read through. Any 4 of the elemental parts of decks. Now, just to remind everybody, there's 22 major cards in the tarot. 0 is considered the Fool or the Joker. And then you go 1 to 21. So there's 22 major cards, and there's 56 minor cards. And our playing cards are actually came out of tarot. And when you get a deck of playing cards, you'll open it up and you'll see a joker or 2 jokers. And often they will have the name of the company on there somewhere, and the joker sort of survives from what was the tarot. And a lot of people do speculate, as you know, Rex, that there are all these mythologies that perhaps initiates that went into the Great Pyramid. It's even said we don't know what happened in Jesus's lost years if we accept the story of what happened 2,000 years ago with that great teacher, that from age 13 to 30, Jesus is going all over the world. And there's all these amazing things about Glastonbury and Scotland and India, that, an amazing figure appeared around that time period. And also that perhaps Jesus went to Egypt and was initiated into the Great Pyramid and all kinds of things. I've read so much literature about this, for 50 years. But what's interesting is it said, I don't know if you'll agree with me as far as, I don't know if you've had anybody on about that initiates would go from the Sphinx into the Great Pyramid. And part of some of the things that I've had in my life that I've studied sort of conjure this whole thing up about life beyond the physical world when people do what's called astral projection. Have you had anybody on the show about dreams and astral projection ever,
Oh, yeah.
Rex?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I used to keep a dream notebook in my 20s, and I learned so much about dreams and visions and out-of-the-body experiences. So you and I haven't really talked about it. But when these cards came up, it was like, oh, my God. So just so you know, folks, there's no major card. There's no, card in here. Like last time, I think we had the Joker was in there, okay, or the Jester, the Fool. And sometimes we've had major cards. There are no major cards. So we've got the 4 of Pentacles, then we have the King of Cups, and then we got the King of 6 of Swords, and the top card is the Ace of Wands. So just so you know, I go from left to right, and then I put a card on the top. And I don't always do a 4-card spread. Usually I just do for myself 1 card. A lot of people do many cards. I like the idea of shuffling a deck, asking for guidance, and then 1 card out of 78 shows up. That to me I mean, I have all kinds of rituals that I do, but that is the strongest. But for this kind of show, it just feels like this is important. So left to right, and I turn them up one at a time, and I never use upside down cards because I love the artwork of whoever creates it. So my personal thing is not to do things like if the card is upside down, do it this way, because the artist never created an upside down type of image. That wasn't in the artist's mind. So here's it's just my personal preference. People do all kinds of things. So you have here, and this is think about what's happening in the United States, folks. Forget politics, just zero out politics, right? Left, right, whatever. The keynote here is hoarding, like hoarding things. 4 is a number of materiality. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 in all the suits will have something to do with earthing or grounding or materializing, whatever the elemental quality of that is. And this is earth. Pentacles relate to material world. And what is written here, it's, hi, I'm Plutus. I'm the Greek personification of abundance and wealth. At first, I'm just reading directly from the description here in your booklet. At first, I was just, quote, plautus, unquote, all about agricultural wealth. But as my stacks grew higher, it increased to all wealth. You've heard of me if you're familiar with the terms plutocracy, plutonomics, plutolatry, and plutomania. It's all about money, honey. Zeus blinded me for the purpose of keeping me from favoring the meritus and to get me to distribute my wealth evenly. But all that did for me was set me on a paranoid issue. This is incredible, as if this is like words out of the collective unconscious to me, or the collective consciousness of humanity right now. That's just my view. So then you wrote here, but all that did for me was set me on a paranoid issue fraught path to hoarding. Hidden booty, ? I've got it. To overflowing. Oink. If you see my card now, you are going to need all your earthly faculties to face issues of frugality, conservation, and security. Do it well with clear-sightedness, stability through security, awareness, and compassion. Turning away from these money issue responsibilities now can only lead to greediness, stinginess, over-the-top possessiveness, and even to sightless, unbalanced hoarding. Now, let's just stop for a second. I want your interaction with me on this. I mean, I'm shuffling up. This is always amazing to me when I do tarot. It's different than astrology, folks. Look, tomorrow afternoon, evening, there's a new moon in Pisces. We're going to talk about that. Mars has been retrograding for 80 days and just recently turned around in the sign Cancer. Whether you're a Cancerian or with the new moon in Pisces, Venus, and next weekend or this coming weekend is going to go in reverse for 6 weeks in Aries. We're going to bring that up. And the astrology is a whole different world. But what happens with the tarot is this is like images of the dream world or the nightmare world or whatever. And all these stories, folks, that we're seeing across the country with the new administration, with all these different people in different positions of power, this always happens every 4 years, no matter who's president and whoever comes into, office. But we also have all these world issues, whether it's what's happening in Europe, what's happening in the Middle East, and all of the planet. So most of this is, for decades now has been on TV. Now it's on social media and all over the place. So we're all being bombarded. And that's where the tarot sort of comes through. So one thing is, and I'd like your opinion about this image, okay, Rex, before we go to the next one, which is another remarkable thing. One thing to think about, everybody, is that while this is what we're looking at, we're not looking at 74 other images, right? Statistics are all important, okay? So that's why whether you do 1 card or 2 cards, 3 cards, 4, 10, whatever it is, find a way to tell yourself a story. That's what this is. It's like waking up, you had a dream, and the first thing you say to yourself after a dream is, what does that mean? So these stories we're seeing now coming out of Washington, D.C., the issue of the plane flights that are going on, why suddenly are there kind of air things that we need to talk about? And we do know that just recently, Jupiter and Saturn, the 2 largest planets, came together in Aquarius, an air sign, and that this air sign dimension is very prominent because the largest 2 planets just came there in the last couple of years, and that's part of a whole bigger cycle as well. So what do you think about this first one? Then we'll go on to the other 3.
Well, you know what I noticed? It looks like apples in the background, like an
Yes,
apple.
it does.
And so that's really prominent to me. I'm thinking of like the apple and Adam and Eve
Exactly.
eating from the forbidden tree. That's what
Right.
I get.
Yeah.
Combined with what you had mentioned when you described the card.
And it's interesting that you started off with this is so beautiful because one of the things that's now happening, you know what I mean, in the United States, but it's really like when you see, and this has nothing to do politically, folks, so don't think Russia, Ukraine. One of the things that's happening is Ukraine. Let me put it this way. America has always been known as the breadbasket to the world and the melting pot, right? In other words, when you think of Kansas, okay, when you think of the Midwest, why is that called the heartland? Well, you can look at a map, right? So the way America grew from the 13 colonies, then we expanded west, then there's Hawaii, Alaska, whatever. But the thing is that we have always been known, and this is interesting because the current president is changing sort of how we distribute funds or agriculture, whatever. And the first concept that comes up today is agriculture, right? So Pluto is the god of the hidden wealth of the earth. Well, right. If you're growing wheat, if you're growing corn, right? I mean, America is not known for growing rice. Okay. That's more in Southeast Asia for the most part. It's not that we don't, grow rice, but it's not the most important crop. Basically, if I still remember my lessons about what what the grains are, corn and wheat. Yes. I mean, right. Rex, corn, and wheat. I mean, what is our breakfast cereal? Kellogg's cornflakes, Post cornflakes. If you go through, I've watched some great documentaries of how all this started. Who were these people? Kellogg, who was Post? These names, Post cereal. It was a whole family with the last name of Post. Then you had Kellogg, you had all these different companies, right? And the whole thing was like, how do we get Americans to eat their breakfast of champions, right? Wheaties, whatever it may be. So as we're growing up and if you're kids and so on, I mean, how many of you who are adults don't go down the aisle, right, at a store and just for yourself, partner, your kids, grandkids, whoever it is. I know how much they love, Tony the Tiger, right? Whatever it is. Now, regardless of whether we put sugar on there, whatever it is, all that is a whole other thing. But this first card is saying, Pluto, the god of the underworld, is also these crops have to have roots that go into the ground. And so this whole issue, that's what Ukraine represents to Europe in many ways. And that's why there are these issues about rare earth minerals and things like that. But it's also when you have war anywhere in the world, okay, one of the big things that happens when you have fighting is famine. You're not exactly tilling the soil. Or remember what happened in the last few years with the whole pandemic thing. Remember the whole thing about everyone having to buy thousands of rolls of toilet paper because you couldn't get it? That had to do with shipping, problems with shipping, right? And also, when people are sick, or whether it's flu or whatever it is, like the Spanish flu of 1918 and so on. I mean, so many people are befallen by some kind of natural disaster. We have these things and human beings are vulnerable. So this card, I think, is really a good example because it talked about hoarding. So many people are worried. And if it's not you, if you're not worried, somebody who is worried, right? About, whether it's land, whether it's money, whether it's, what you're eating, inflation, all that. So this card, I think, tells a story that's sort of better than if like some major card came up right in that position. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And when this one came up, you can't believe this because I already had this card dog-eared in your booklet. So let me find it. The Knight of Cups. Okay. This is beautifully written here. So you see the winged figure. So this is, we go from the Pluto thing of hoarding and, making sure you got your resources or, talk about being earthy, like you said, apples, and the Garden of Eden, that is a beautiful part of all this because Pluto also, people worry about the god of the underworld and different things. Then we bring up the whole thing of, what caused Adam and Eve to sort of leave the Garden of Eden. Again, mythologically, actually, depending on your religious philosophical views, what is that meaning? So, and it is interesting in that first card, like as you pointed out, that Pluto figure is kind of looking upward toward, the top there, toward where the apples are. You know what I mean? The figure who's holding the pentagram is kind of looking up at both the cloud, right, where the number 4 is, and the apple. It's what's coming out of the earth, and the kind of concern about that and holding that pentagon. Now we shift from there, and this keynote is the Knight of Cups. Romantic is the keynote. Hi, I'm Vishnu. Well, if you're into anything about India, you'll know what Vishnu is. And it's written here in your guidebook. So this is
just a moment, real quick. I literally did a podcast today and referenced Vishnu.
Well,
that's pretty cool.
Rex Bear and Great Bear Enterprises, the bear totem, the 7 stars of the Great Bear, why we have these energies and why we're doing this. To me, a lot of this is this kind of cosmic energy. So I had this page dog-eared, before. And so when I opened the little guidebook, I opened it up and it was as if like we must have had this card show up a while back, but I think it could have been over a year ago. So it says here, I'm Vishnu. It is said I originated when Lord Shiva rubbed some nectar on his ankle, some salve, huh? I'm known as the preserver, part of the Trimurti Hindu triad. Yes, I'm the good guy, heroic god of protection, controller, karmic restoration, and more. If you see my card now, know that a message of certain emotional benefit is on its way to save the day. And it's got to include some stuff like following your heart, news of legitimate idealistic pursuits, and about relishing life as a riveting romantic like me. Got to stay in touch with that intuitive feminine side to balance all this bona fide handsomeness for sure. But life is not always but life is not always incense and lotus blossoms, peace, love, and butterflies. When my 3 wives, Lakshmi, Sarawati, and Ganja, start arguing, well, that's impossible to live with. I find that to be very humorous here. And so in my magic moodiness, slight vanity and desperate disappointment sometimes. So at any rate, there's humor in here, but Vishnu. So why don't you tell me, because what happened, where did you get Vishnu coming up? How did that happen for you?
Well, I recently got back from Bluff, Utah, and we were looking at some petroglyphs out there at a place called Kachina Panel. And these petroglyphs have a lot of depictions that will remind you of like Angkor Wat and Hindu deities that have the headdress that appears to be almost antenna-like.
Okay.
And so some of the deities from India, one of them in particular is Vishnu. And the deity himself will oftentimes be depicted with these snake heads behind him, like these sagas, which there are petroglyphs of what's called the squatter man, and behind the squatter man you'll see sometimes what looks like feathers or antennas or snakes. And so I've got a working theory right now that many of these symbols and gods and deities were actually what people saw in space, in the heavens, like whether it was a solar flare, some type of event that caused the aurora borealis to become just enormous, but something happened, and you can link that with the Younger Dryas event. So that's why I had brought up Vishnu, referencing that. So that's pretty cool that the center card is Vishnu.
Yeah, I was just going to say the center card. So remember, folks, the way I do it is I shuffle the deck, and then I just take cards out, and I put them face down first, and then I turn up one at a time. I don't just turn them all up. Okay. So the first card was that 4 of Pentacles. And then, and in the back of my mind, you see, I know that whatever the first card is obvious. You could say that's just happening in the recent past. And then the middle card, Vishnu here, would be the now, like this moment. And then the next card will be right after now. In other words, tonight, tomorrow, whatever you want to call it. And the top for me is like a synthesis, okay, in this situation. Part of by the way, under that top card we'll get to is the rest of the Tarot of Ra deck. Okay, just so you all know. So I do all this symbolically because the whole Tarot is sort of the collective unconscious or the collective consciousness. So these are just my rituals. when you get tarot deck for yourself, I mean, I don't know when you started this, did you ever get the thing where it'd say it's advisable to get a little silk scarf and wrap them in silk and then put them in some kind of little box and have them near, like a talisman? Did you ever have that, when you got into all this?
No, but it makes sense because that's kind of the Hermetics principle about some value. So your magical tools.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we never talked about this, but I just want everybody to know, you've given a look. I'm no spring chicken, and clearly, if you'll see the white and gray of hair that I do have left, and the beard. I don't. If I could just wave a magic wand myself, talk about the Ace of Wands at the top. My inner self is like 20. That's when I got into this. That's sort of where I'm at. You know what I mean? In my consciousness, 50 years ago. So this is a beautiful card, like you said, and I completely agree with you because when I think of Von Daniken, when I think of ancient astronauts and my childhood of all these movies, I was into Atlantis. I remember watching these movies that came out like in the 1950s and the 1960s, some of which are completely forgotten. The Red Planet Mars, these different kind of, particularly The Day the Earth Stood Still, the original one, which, by the way, folks, was directed by Robert Wise, the original Day the Earth Stood Still of 1951 in black and white. And then he's the same director. This is something is like almost impossible to believe, who directed The Sound of Music 14 years later. How do you have the director of one of the great science fiction classics with Michael Rennie and Patricia Neal, and actually the little boy eventually becomes Bud on Father Knows Best, one of the old classics in the 1950s. That is, if you have a chance to watch The Day the Earth Stood Still, it's on different places. I know it's something you can get if you have Blu-ray or, that kind of thing. I actually have a copy of that. I don't have a Blu-ray player at the moment, but, I do have a copy of that, the original, The Day the Earth Stood Still. But when you watch these kind of movies, as I did, and so they're still available all over the place, about Atlantis, where you're talking about Angkor Wat, Cambodia, all these pyramids, it's just incredible what is going on the planet. And I knew you cover a lot of this, like pyramids in the Antarctic. Didn't you do a show recently about pyramids either in Europe or Africa or some other place that we recently discovered? Yes?
No, it's been a little while, but I did something on possible anomaly on Mars. So, and there's some places by Sidonia, Mars, that look like they could be pyramids. That might have been what you were thinking.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. That whole thing, I used to be in touch with Richard Hoagland and other different people, who were on about that whole area. And, I am convinced beyond anything, based on all my studies, and even Albert Einstein got into this from Worlds in Collision from Immanuel Velikovsky, which was, I've mentioned it before, but he was a great Russian anthropologist. And he's the one who believed that during the time period of the Israelites leaving Israel, 1400 BC, 1300, whenever it was, time of Moses, that manna from heaven and all this, what was actually happening where Mars and Venus had come out of their orbits. Literally, I mean, this is what the guy proposed. And just so you know, one of the things that no one knew about Venus, because the Russians sent several probes to Venus while we were sending them to Mars. The Russians were sending them to Venus, actually back in the 60s and 70s. And nobody knew what the temperature of Venus was. This has only come out recently. But in 1950, Immanuel Velikovsky came up with to scientists of our country, outlandish proposal. Hey, planets moved, the manna from heaven, all of these different things, whatever actually happened, the plagues of Egypt, were actually because there were astronomical movements of Mars and Venus. And this is what is called the war in heaven. I know you've covered that, right? Mythologically.
Not that exactly, but not the manna from heaven, but the Mars and the Venus.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Mm-hmm. And just so everyone knows, Albert Einstein, who died in 1955, when this controversy happened, literally the year I was born, but in 1950, this book came out, Worlds in Collision. Yeah. And then, so it made this whole splash, and it made scientists were just so angry at this person for getting into religion, saying things like Mars and Venus left their orbits. But Albert Einstein became friends with Immanuel Velikovsky. And I was just reading another thing. Have you ever done anything on continent displacement and the whole thing of the magnetic poles changing? Because we could talk about that at some point.
Bits and pieces, but not a specific show.
Well, there was a book by a guy named Hapgood was his last name. Apparently it was on Albert Einstein's desk when he passed away. And it had to do about the whole thing of the continents were different, thousands of years ago, if not hundreds of thousands. You go back to Ice Age and so on. If you look at the Earth and you sort of put all the continents, sort of merge them, you see that they all fit together like a giant jigsaw puzzle, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that those continents moving along the surface of the Earth. I mean, again, we are concerned about, remember it used to be the San Andreas Fault. How many movies, how many stories? If there was a 9, if there was a 10. Now, I was just looking at a whole thing on Fukushima. We could talk about that at some point. I actually made a prediction about that day, March 11 of 2011, when I was online on a show. A couple months before that date, and I told everybody watch March 11, 2011, and that was because Uranus, that planet, was entering Aries on that day. So a couple months before March 11, 2011, I was on a show about the Mayan calendar in 2012, and everybody was talking about what their predictions were. And I said, wait a minute, that's a year away. I said, everybody needs to look at March 11, 2011, because Uranus is going to enter Aries for the first time in 84 years. I didn't say where to look. I didn't say anything. That was the day in the afternoon at Fukushima where an earthquake hit and then a tsunami. And I was just watching on a show on the whole thing. That's even a bigger disaster. Well, between that and Chernobyl are the two biggest nuclear, disasters in our history. And we also had 3 Mile Island in 1979. So this is a whole fascinating thing about tinkering with this, unbelievable power from the sun, whether it's fission, fusion, and so on. I've done all this astrology about that particular subject. So maybe Vishnu is coming up here as the central card because we are all in a worry about what's happening with resources, agriculture, land, the price of eggs, the price of apples, whatever it may be. And Vishnu is there as this protector. But again, Vishnu as the Knight of Cups, which brings up water and caring and nurturing, is not it's not the major arcana. It's sort of saying inside yourself, you see, to tap into your own Vishnu energy. That's how I read it. You know what I mean? How can you preserve the life of your business, your family, and your family's well-being, right? And your community and your country and the planet as a whole? Does that seem to make sense?
Oh,
what
yeah.
do you think?
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting.
Okay, so let's do the other two. I do want to share some astrology, in this time period. Now, suddenly, I love the way we started with pentacles, which are more of the material world, basically, the 5-point star. And then we go to a court figure, which is bringing up the Trinity from Hindu, from another complete culture. It's interesting that the first card connects us back to Greece and Rome, kind of the Mediterranean. This second card brings us, again, here we are in the United States doing these cards. That's why they're part of our heritage of all these cultures. And you bring up Cambodia and Angkor Wat. This is why, listening to your show, and bringing up all of what's happening on the whole planet, trying to sort of make sense of it all. Now we have the number 6, and the 6 is always, even if you don't see it there with the 6 of Swords, this is a beautiful card. I love this card, and what you have to say here to me is just extraordinary. So that's why I wanted to read this one, and then we'll go to the Ace of Wands. So this is like, based on the first two, this is where we're all going, what we need to sort of try and understand. You'll see that there's a kind of ferryman with a long pole. And this is a traditional image in so many of the tarot decks, whether it's the Waite Rider deck and so on, going back, 100 so years. 6 swords in a boat. You see these two figures, I think they're 2, and you're on water. And obviously, just from looking at it without the interpretation, there's a transition, right? That you can get a sense of these people are being ferried across a river to somewhere else from wherever they've been. 6 is a number of harmony and peace. Think of the 6-pointed star, okay, which goes back to the Seal of Solomon, the Star of David. Even though it is connected to the Israel and the Israelites and it's on their flag, if you go back to the idea of Solomon's temple and a lot of the mythology of which is also many of you may know, if you're into tarot, in the Jewish tradition, there's the Kabbalah, which is the esoteric idea. That's what I was into 50 plus years ago. Things like the tree of life, these different patterns of things. So there's all this esoteric energy of all different cultures and all different kinds of tarot. So again, these tarot reappeared, whatever was happening thousands of years ago, whether there was a kind of passageway between the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid. I mean, that's part of a mythology because we don't really know yet when were the pyramids built, when was the Sphinx built. And I've studied a lot of Edgar Cayce, and all of those go way back. You know, I know you've had people on about this. You know, it wasn't for a tomb for Khufu. You know, it wasn't built necessarily in 2500 BC. You know, it may be 25,000 BC or 10,000 BC. And also, they've investigated the Sphinx because they now know that there was water in that part of the world, you know what I mean, in Egypt so many thousands of years ago, and they could see how the rocks and the erosion on the base of the Sphinx is different than what's happening where the Great Pyramid is, so that the Sphinx was built, you know, at a completely different time, you know what I mean, and somehow there was water in the desert there. There was water flowing there. So at any rate, here's water with the 6 of swords. So I'll make this one. Let me see if I can find my sword area. Bear with me. I have the tape. Oh, here we go. Okay. So you ready for this, folks? This is from, again, the guidebook here, 6 of Swords transitional. And think of this, you and your the people who wrote this, as well as yourself, you had a particular writer and illustrator, yes? I mean, obviously,
yes. Sally Brady. Sally Brady is her name. She's incredible.
Okay. 6 of Swords transitional. Hi, I'm Orpheus. I'm only legendary in relation to my beautiful Eurydice. And maybe for some excellent lyre playing. Think again, the lyre is similar to a guitar, or it's not really a guitar, but it's an ancient sort of form of that. When I would play, all earthly beasts would gather just to hear my songs. Heck, it's kind of how I got Eurydice's attention in the first place. But my bliss with Eurydice was sad faded. She died soon of a snake bite. Remember, you brought up snakes a few minutes ago. She died soon of a snake bite, leaving me lost and crushed with grief. If you see my card now, you are surely in a world of uncertainty now, in transition, sadly moving on and having to leave something behind. Moving forward is the ideal option for your future. Resisting transition can only result in unresolved issues, heavy, sodden with sadness and emotional baggage. You have to separate from feelings and turn to logic, clarity, and objectivity. Difficult, but doable. The one thing I want to say here is that my work in astrology, and even with this, if you hear what I'm saying, I don't just turn up a bunch of cards or even one card and just sort of like, I'm in La La Land. Everything to me needs to be logical and mathematical, okay? That's why I love astrology, because astrology, I love geometry, particularly, you know, I love math. Eventually, I started reading a whole lot, but my childhood was more love of math because I love numbers and I love sports. And I was always reading the World Almanac. So growing up in New York, we had all these sports teams. And so that was my childhood, numbers, sports, the numbers on uniforms, you know, of fame, you know, whether it was Mickey Mantle number 7 or whoever it would be as a child. As kids, we'd have baseball cards. We'd do all these different things with football cards, basketball cards, you know, our heroes, our heroines, all these different people in sports. Now, back to the 6 of Swords and this particular energy, what's going on. We all have, what I'm saying here is don't take this necessarily literally. It doesn't mean if you're a guy that somebody you love has passed away or, you know, is going through a crisis. I think of this as Carl Jung, the Swiss psychotherapist who got into UFOs. He actually did the charts of married people in astrology. So we have Carl Jung to thank for the other thing, which is anima and animus. He's the one who, in studying about India and other cultures, brought us the concept that every male individual on this planet has an inner feminine. Every woman has an inner masculine. So this idea that like a woman will be thinking of her ideal male figure, like the guy on the horse, white horse or something, coming to save her. All these are like stories of like Cinderella, right? The slipper, the prince, somebody toiling and not having a mother and father, and then suddenly, being recognized, as a princess kind of thing in the Cinderella story, or Snow White. Those are the things in inner child cards. They're all part of the collective unconsciousness with fairy tales. So the point is, every person who's male out there, you have an inner feminine that's the balance to your life, your physical body or your physical life, and every woman has what Jung would call the animus. I believe what that means. This is just my opinion. If we accept reincarnation, okay, which again is accepted by so many people in India and other places, China, other areas who get into Buddhism and Hinduism and other kinds of isms, not necessarily modern Christianity or modern Judaism. I'm not sure in the Islamic faith, how they look at other lives and things like that, or coming back, from one life to another. But the thing is that my sense of what this card is all about is all of us need to be in transition. So this whole idea, whoever this fairy man figure is, of course, that is in the mythology also of Pluto and the underworld. You probably know this, but like Mercury, okay, the god Mercury or Hermes in mythology, when somebody passed over to the other side, in whatever way they passed over, then that soul would have to be taken into the underworld to go through, just like in Egyptian mythology, the Book of the Dead and these other kind of rituals, to sort of undergo a catharsis, a purging of things in order to purify one's soul, you know what I mean, before entering enlightenment or a heavenly realm. And so there's all these mythologies, but in order to get there, you needed like a ferryman person. And Charon, the first main moon of Pluto, when we discovered that Pluto had a moon, which was back around 1978, Pluto was discovered in 1930. But in 1978, an astronomer sighted a moon, and now we know there's 5 moons around Pluto. Okay, and they have these mythological names. Charon, Charon, not to be confused with Chiron, which is a little planet between Saturn and Uranus. And Chiron has been very active. We've shared about that recently. But Charon was the so-called ferryman. Okay, but he was sort of a representation also of Mercury, the winged messenger of the divine. And so you needed to have somebody, right, who would take the soul of a dead person. Or if this is more symbolic, it's like we're all dying to the old way of life on our planet in 2025. There are so many changes. So the water represents the waters of the earth. The swords represent sort of the balance that we all need to transition from the sensitivity. And again, that figure in the boat, there is some kind of mourning, because like when you have to leave the old world, I mean, look at all the things like Kentucky just had a whole bunch of, floods, right? Los Angeles had this fire stuff. The freezing conditions, we had this polar vortex, now everything is getting a little nicer, like in the United States, but it's been a really rough weather kind of thing the last year. Okay. So we'll move on to the last one. Does that make some sense about the Six of Swords?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Very fast.
Well, yeah. And I found this really beautiful here. This is so different. But to end with an Ace of Wands, remember, folks, this connects up to the whole rest of the deck, which is underneath it. Inspirational. And I may mispronounce this, but it says here, you may know this word more. I'm Yoruba Shango. I am third Alafin of the Oi Kingdom, Southwest Nigeria. So this image comes out of Nigeria. I am known as the god of thunder and lightning. Storms may be my wrath, but they also bring life for the rich lands of my people. Now think of this. We started with agriculture with that Pluto, and now the fourth card, it says storms may be my wrath, but they also bring life for the rich lands of my people, as well as acting as instruments of divine justice. If you see my card now, you will be full of creation, willpower, inspiration, and desire, like me. Embrace the opportunity and take the dancing wand from my hand now and thrive! Exclamation point. To wait another moment will only breed wasteful energy loss, lost passion, and great sad boredom in this mysterious world. Come and take it now. Well, to me, this reading, without a major arcana card, including Vishnu, right? A Four of Pentacles, a Six of Swords. We've got these still, the middle card is water. I mean, Vishnu is let's preserve and protect, right? And a winged, amazing winged figure, part of this great trinity. In the beginning, we're talking about Earth. We're talking about agriculture. We're talking about apples. We're talking about like the mythology. Whatever you believe, what is the Garden of Eden? Human beings they weren't exactly wearing wardrobes. You weren't going to Macy's or where were you going and get this is the advent of materialism and malls and everything else. I mean, we love style, right? Everybody's got their style, whether it's a sweatshirt or whether it's like, dressed to the nines. But the thing is that we're reaching a point here. It was like, we're thinking of like origins, like the Garden of Eden, and temptations and, the beauty of the earth and, apples. One of the things that I've noticed recently when I go to the grocery store, how many kinds of apples there are, you know what I mean? And in the United States, this is not rocket science. The state of Washington is one of the main places where apples are growing. One of the things I read, by the way, let me just end this on this note. I don't know what people think about Steve Jobs, okay, at this point. And by the way, Steve Jobs, folks, was born with Mercury retrograde. So keep that, because this is one of my pet subjects, that retrograding planets are not really going backwards, folks. I think you all know that. We're 93 million miles from the sun. So when we get something like, oh my God, a lot of astrologers say Mars is retrograde, or we're going to come up with Mercury is going to go retrograde actually on March 14th. This is true from the Earth's point of view for 3 weeks. But no planet ever is going backwards. That's just an illusion, okay? Because we're 93 million miles from the sun. It doesn't mean that when astrologers say, well, Mercury's retrograde or Venus, first of all, that is not a bad thing. And unfortunately, a lot of astrologers who don't have 5 decades like myself will put out, well, don't do this, don't do that, and so on. That's not true. So when planets are going or appear to go in reverse, life goes on. When Mercury's in reverse, it doesn't mean that every communication or every word or every document is going to fall apart. That's not it. But you see, fear gets created with all of this. And even the word retrograde implies something not so great. And I'm a kind of a wordsmith. So I like to change things around to use more appropriate words. Okay. So at any rate, this is a beautiful reading. The way it's integrated, again, I have to just honor this. I mean, Rex, you and who's the partner again? The person, what's her name, who created the cards, the images?
Sally Brady.
The two persons who, one person created inner child cards, Christopher Guilfoyle. Like, it wasn't easy to do all of it, but you get a brilliant person, and these stories that are part of the Tarot of Ra. This is different, folks. For instance, all the decks, the 2 decks I created, and how you create the interpretations for each card and what you put in there. This deck is extremely unusual. Now, I do not have 1,000 decks. I have like 12, 15, and I'm partial to certain ones. But this, to me, the writing, the cards, and the process by which these show up, particularly at this point. So that's what I want to say. Would you want to comment about Nigeria and the god of thunder and lightning? It just feels amazing to end with an ace. And wands are a magic wand. This reminds me of the human spine and the chakras and the alignments that each of us need to have to use those other 3 cards and sort of come out victorious.
I think that's amazing. And I also see a lot of extreme weather this year and next year. And I think that the cards based upon the god of thunder, the ace of wands, as well as the Vishnu card, and then the six of swords. And
right.
And then when I look at the 4 of pentacles, I just envision I envision something with the coming up from the earth. So like earthquakes. I envision earthquakes, lightning,
Yeah.
fire and lightning, tornadoes and hurricanes.
Yeah.
And also think about how maybe you're also pulling what has already happened, because a lot of this has already happened. And look at all the money that and all the people that have lost their homes and in California, North Carolina, all around. So
and that I think is particularly summed up in that first card. You know what I mean? Brilliantly. I mean, again, I'm just a vehicle for this. You know, that's when you choose anything with tarot, there is a big soul, spiritual, like I say, collective consciousness, different, there was the concept of the noosphere, Buckminster Fuller, some of these people who were also scientists, right, and theologians. It's people from, who talked about, like, again, the idea of the collective unconscious is a concept that I believe came out of Jung. I'm pretty sure he was the one after Freud, because those two were the origins of what we call modern psychology. But they're so different in terms of, those two figures. Let me just mention Steve Jobs for a second. Steve Jobs, again, throw away, look, I'm saying this humorously. In the field of astrology for 50 years, you had to decide in the beginning whether you were going to be a Windows person or a Mac person. You had to make the decision. It wasn't my choice. My friend, Michael Erlewine, who has this great matrix software, if you go to Great Bear Enterprise, you're going to see, hey, Mark, I'd like to get a reading with you. So if you want to get a reading, you get a reading. Consultations. But the bread and butter of what I've also done for people who just want to get into this, like, what is my chart? I'm not ready for a reading. That's where you get a wheel for a few dollars, or you get a report that is computerized about your cycles or your birth chart. So I have been selling through the best company that's been out there for 40 years. And I was actually a beta tester of these programs in my earlier life, because I was getting into technology and all this. And I was very good, because I got into this because I was a writer at Michigan State University who went to school. And I had no background in journalism in high school. I wasn't on the high school writing, high school publication or anything. I walked into Michigan State's office one day because we had a great newspaper. They were winning all these awards. I just walked in there one day when I was 18 years old as a sophomore and said, "Hi, do you have any positions open?" I don't even know what compelled me to do this. And the guy at the editorial just said, "Well, our editorial assistant just left. Do you think you might be able to do anything like that?" And I said, "Okay, try me out." And then I became a columnist and a writer there. So I had to learn all of these things, all of these skill sets about words and language and all these other things. But at the same time, it sort of opened my mind up to just how to communicate. This is way before, it wasn't until after college. Like you said, my mom wanted me to be a medical doctor, and it turned out to be more of doctor of the psyche, doctor of the stars, doctor of astrology, so to speak. You know what I mean? For the last 15 years. It's just the way my destiny factors came out. All these astrologers that are online, I've got a lot of friends who are still alive. A lot of them are in their 80s. Many have passed on. My main teachers have passed on. And there's all this, radical change with computerization and charts and so on. But the cosmos is still the cosmos. We're on Earth. The planets, astrologers say, well, this planet is going retrograde. You got to remember, folks, that when you look at an astrology chart, or you see one online or whatever it is, that's a piece of paper. That's a two-dimensional representation of a 3 and 4 and multi-dimensional reality. It's not, if you accept the idea, and again, this is pretty philosophical, but this is the way, when I got into all this, is like, everything was, oh my God, in the beginning, because I knew nothing about even sun signs. And as I started reading, it's kind of like, okay, the sun signs make sense. But then the sun signs you can learn, because if you're born on August 1, you learn you're a Leo, because that's in the middle of this 30-day period of the lion, right? Leo. If you're born like now, February 27th and February 26th, then that's several days into Pisces. And tomorrow there's going to be a new moon when the sun and moon are both there. But unless you're an astrologer or know how to sort of do a chart, you don't know where the moon is. So every person born on February 26th is a sun sign Pisces of any year. But unless you can study astrology, the moon is so close to us, 250,000 miles, it keeps changing every 2 to 2.5 days. And your moon is much more of your inner self, personality, moods, feelings. And if you're thinking reincarnation, you want to look at celestial bodies like the moon, Saturn, Pluto. Certain planets are more connected to karma and things like that. Whereas the sun is your life force. Look, if you're lucky enough to not be in a stormy area in the northern hemisphere, now we're moving into spring. In the southern hemisphere, they're moving into fall. We also don't take account of that very much in astrology because astrology originated in the northern hemisphere. We could have a whole thing on that. And this is all, my love to everybody living in Melbourne, Australia. Chile, Chile just lost all its power yesterday. Talk about a lot of our movies that we've been watching about losing. You saw that story in the last 24 hours? About Chile?
No, I did not.
Oh, well, yesterday, almost all of Chile lost its everything went dark for hundreds of miles because of transformer problems. I mean, you and I just watched something, out there in the ethers about things that would just sort of like come out of nowhere, right? That are things we need, this technology. If we were living in Chile now, this wouldn't be happening yesterday. I don't know if they fixed it, but yesterday, hundreds of miles of Chile went dark. They showed pictures of people being in a mall somewhere, going on an escalator, and then that went dark. So folks, look this up. This is not false news. Chile, the country of Chile in South America, lost power of an enormous stretch of the country because of it. There we go. We were trapped like sardines in the whatever it was you just showed in the dark. Power outage in Chile leaves millions without electricity. So the thing is that I've been a news hound for 50 plus years, watching TV and so on. And now, of course, we do have issues. Is this a real story? Is it not a real story? Is it real? Is it fake? Whatever it is. So I'm just mentioning that because we were just tuned in to whether you watch things like Netflix or other kind of things that are out there. There are all these documentaries and all these interesting movies and other things. And so much of growing up with sci-fi about Atlantis or, Atlantis, the lost continent and things like that. And the work of, Van Daniken, Ancient Aliens. I like watching things like William Shatner, who just turned, I guess, 94, which is amazing. And he went up in one of those vehicles, either with Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. He got to actually go into outer space. So on the astrology level, because I know we're almost out of time, folks, tomorrow is a new moon in Pisces. Okay, so we have new moons where the sun and moon come together. That happens every 29 days. 2 weeks from tomorrow, approximately, there'll be a total lunar eclipse where the sun is in Pisces and the moon is in Virgo. It's going to be visible in most parts of the United States. And if you're online, you're going to be seeing things, the blood moon or this or that. Often they're named different things. The important thing right now is that Mars did appear to go in reverse from the Earth's point of view, even though no planet actually is spinning backwards. It's just an illusion. And regardless of what astrologers say, I'm not here to say it's meaningless. When planets appear to go retrograde, you want to review, reflect, and reevaluate about what that planet means. But the one thing I will not agree with my cohorts in astrology is do not create fear about anything. Everything, like with these cards, right? We look at that first card. When I saw it, it was like, oh, Pluto. Okay, well, that can't be all that great until you read the whole story. You see, agriculture, hoarding. People are hoarding. And look, that's not false. What happened with the pandemic? Now there are worries about measles, about flu. We don't know the extent. Nobody knows. Nobody knows these statistics. The initial reports are often slightly off. It's been happening with these plane things. A lot of the things with the reports the other day when there was one plane thing, they're all fine. Nobody's been injured on these flights. Then like an hour later, wait a minute, The first reports were the plane that was upside down that landed and they lost the wing, right? Then they showed all those pictures. It was fine until the last second or two. It was an icy runway. The landing gear didn't work well. And then suddenly over like 2 days, there's all these people who happen to take a picture. You know what I mean? Or a little video for 5 seconds. And then after 2 or 3 days, you finally start getting the main report. But, that's what we all have to be as conscientious as possible. And I know many people now are so turned off because they just assume anything that's on the news is a piece of crap.
Jump on over to our Patreon page for unedited, uncensored, exclusive content, and you can watch the rest of this presentation. Be excellent to each other. Be the change you want to see.